They laughed. Not loudly, but loud enough. The radar screen was dead. No signal. No backup. No answers. The Navy's best experts surrounded the system, fingers flying, voices tense. Minutes passed, then more minutes. Silence grew heavier. That's when they noticed him. An old man, kneeling quietly near the cables. Hands steady, eyes sharp. "Stop pretending, Grandpa," someone muttered. "Let the experts do it." He didn't argue. He didn't explain. He simply reached for the tools. The deck went quiet, because some knowledge isn't taught in classrooms. Some experience isn't written in manuals. And some men don't need permission to fix what others can't. What happened next forced everyone to stand at attention. The radar room was never supposed to go quiet. There was always a sound, a hum, a pulse, a rhythm that told everyone on board the ship that they were seen, protected, aware. The radar was the ship's eyes. Without it, the ocean wasn't just wide, it was blind. That hum died without warning. One moment, green lines swept the screen in perfect circles. The next, nothing. A flat glow. No targets. No echoes. At first, no one panicked. Not yet. Lieutenant Carter leaned closer to the console, tapping the glass with 2 fingers as if the signal might wake up out of respect. "Reset cycle," he said calmly. A technician complied. Switches flipped. Keys clicked. The screen blinked once, then stayed dead. Brows tightened. Voices lowered. "Backup array? Already routing. Power levels are normal. Then why am I getting nothing?" Minutes passed. The ocean outside remained calm, mocking them with its endless blue. But inside the radar room, tension began to creep in like a slow leak. Officers gathered. Engineers crowded the panels. Someone wiped sweat from their forehead despite the cold air. This wasn't a training drill. This wasn't a simulation. Without radar, the ship was vulnerable. Invisible threats didn't announce themselves. The captain was informed. And suddenly, everything mattered more. Orders came faster. Diagnostics ran deeper. Cables were unplugged and reconnected. Software rebooted. Hardware tested. Each expert spoke with confidence, but their confidence didn't change the screen. Still blank. Still silent. "That's impossible," one engineer muttered. "This system was upgraded last year." Another shook his head. No physical damage. No surge. No external interference. The room filled with explanations, but no solutions. That's when the old man stepped inside. He didn't announce himself, didn't interrupt, didn't clear his throat for attention. He simply stood near the doorway, hands behind his back, observing. His uniform was older than the systems they were working on. Faded patches, creased sleeves, a cap that had seen decades of sun and salt. His hair was white, his posture slightly bent, but his eyes were sharp. Too sharp. He watched how they moved, how they touched the equipment, how they ignored certain panels completely. No one noticed him at first. Why would they? He looked like a relic in a room full of cutting-edge technology. Eventually, a young officer glanced back and frowned. "Sir, this area is restricted." The old man nodded once and stepped aside, giving them space, but he didn't leave. He crouched near the base of the main console, close to where thick cables disappeared into the floor. He didn't touch anything, just listened. The radar room smelled faintly of metal and heat. A faint vibration pulsed through the deck. Engine steady, systems alive. Everything was working, except the one thing that mattered. "Sir," another voice snapped, frustration bleeding through rank. "We've tried everything." The captain arrived moments later. He surveyed the room in silence, eyes moving from face to face, then to the dead screen. His jaw tightened, not in anger, but in calculation. "How long?" he asked. 23 minutes, sir." "Too long." The captain nodded slowly. "Keep working." That's when the old man finally spoke. Quietly, calmly. "May I look?" The room froze. Heads turned. Some surprised, some annoyed. One or two barely hid a smile. An engineer scoffed under his breath. "With respect, sir, this system is classified, modern, complex," the old man finished gently. He looked at the radar screen, not like a machine, but like an old friend who had gone quiet. "I know," he said. "I helped design its grandfather." Silence followed. Not disbelief. Not laughter. Just silence. Because for the first time since the radar failed, someone wasn't guessing. No one moved. The radar room stayed frozen in a strange, uncomfortable silence, as if the air itself was waiting to see who would speak first. The old man's words hung there, heavy and unsettling. I helped design its grandfather. A few officers exchanged glances. One engineer let out a quiet breath through his nose, half disbelief, half impatience. Another checked the captain's face, trying to read whether this was a test or a mistake. The captain didn't respond immediately. He studied the old man, really studied him now. The faded uniform, the calm posture, the way his eyes never left the silent radar screen. "Sir," Lieutenant Carter finally said, choosing his words carefully. "With respect, this system has been upgraded multiple times. Digital filters, encrypted layers, AI-assisted tracking." The old man nodded. "I know, that simple answer unsettled them more than an argument would have." A junior technician whispered to another, not quietly enough, "He's probably thinking of the old analog days." A faint smile crossed the veteran's face, not offended, not defensive, just understanding. "Those days," he said softly, "are still buried in here." He pointed, not at the screen, but at the lower access panel no one had opened. "Right there." The engineer closest to the panel frowned. "We ran full diagnostics. There's no fault reported in that section." "Of course not," the old man replied. "It doesn't report faults. It listens." That earned a few raised eyebrows. The captain stepped forward. "Explain." The old man slowly knelt down, joints protesting but controlled. He rested one hand on the metal casing, as if feeling a pulse. "Back when this architecture was first tested," he said, "we learned something the hard way. When everything looks normal and nothing works, it's usually because one small thing was designed not to speak unless spoken to first." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a pair of old, worn-ear protectors. Slipped them on. Then he closed his eyes. The room stayed silent, except for the faint vibration of his ship. He tilted his head slightly. "There," he murmured. A technician blinked. "There what?" "A frequency mismatch. Not enough to trigger alarms. Enough to confuse the system into silence." The engineer crossed his arms. "That would require physical recalibration. We'd see that in a report." The old man finished again. "Only if the system thinks something is wrong." He opened his eyes and looked up at the captain. "Sir, permission to remove the lower panel." The captain hesitated. This wasn't protocol. This wasn't standard procedure. This was a gamble. Around him, the experts waited, some hoping he'd say no, others curious despite themselves. "How long?" the captain asked. 2 minutes, the old man replied. "Maybe less." Another officer leaned in. "And if you're wrong?" The old man didn't look offended. "Then you've lost 2 minutes," he said, and gained confirmation. The captain exhaled slowly. "Proceed." The word landed like a dropped pin. The technician unlocked the panel. Metal clicked. The cover came away, revealing dense wiring, old and new intertwined like generations sharing the same spine. The old man leaned closer, eyes scanning, not searching but remembering. "There," he said again. He reached out but stopped. He looked up. "May I?" The captain nodded once. Carefully, the veteran adjusted a small, almost invisible component, something no one else had noticed because it didn't look broken. He tapped it lightly with a tool. The radar screen flickered. A single green line swept across the display. The room gasped. Not fully alive yet, but no longer dead. The old man straightened slowly. "Now," he said, calm as ever, "we can wake it up." And for the first time since the failure began, hope entered the room. The green line on the radar screen faded, then swept again. Once. Twice. A heartbeat. The room didn't cheer. It didn't celebrate. Everyone simply stared, afraid that even breathing too loudly might scare the signal away. The old man remained kneeling, his hands still resting near the open panel. "Not yet," he said quietly, sensing the tension behind him. "She's listening now. Don't rush her." An engineer swallowed. "Listening to what?" "To herself," the veteran replied. He reached deeper into the compartment and adjusted a second component, smaller than the first. His movements were slow, deliberate, nothing like the frantic hands that had been flying over keyboards minutes earlier. The radar screen brightened. Lines formed. Circles returned. A low hum filled the room, the sound everyone had missed but hadn't realized until now. The radar was breathing again. Signal acquisition confirmed. A technician said, voice barely steady. Primary array responding. Secondary channels online. Range increasing. One by one, systems that had been declared fully functional moments earlier suddenly came alive. The captain straightened, eyes locked on the screen. Status. Radar restored, sir, came the reply. Full sweep in progress. A quiet exhale moved through the room. Not relief yet, but something close to awe. The old man stood, slowly removing his ear protection. His knees protested, but he ignored them. He wiped his hands on a cloth and stepped back, giving the space back to the younger crew. I think that does it, he said. Lieutenant Carter turned to him, disbelief written openly across his face. How did you know? The veteran considered the question. Because it failed the same way 37 years ago. Silence fell again, but this time it was different. It wasn't tense. It was respectful. He continued, voice calm, almost reflective. Back then, we didn't have software to hide the problem. We heard it, felt it. The system didn't break. It got confused. One engineer shook his head slowly. We ran every test. The old man smiled gently. You ran the right tests, just not the old ones. The radar now painted the ocean clearly. Contacts, distances, movement. Everything crisp. Everything alive. The captain stepped closer. What's your name? He asked. The old man hesitated, then answered. Chief Petty Officer Samuel Hayes. Retired. The captain nodded once, then snapped to attention. Every officer in the room followed instinctively. The salute wasn't loud. It wasn't ceremonial. It was earned. Hayes returned it, just as sharp, just as precise as if decades hadn't passed. Thank you for stepping in, Chief, the captain said. Hayes shook his head. Thank you for letting me. The captain glanced at the open panel. Can you prevent this from happening again? Hayes stepped forward once more, pointing to a specific junction. A minor redesign would help. But more importantly, train them to listen. Machines talk. Most people forget that. A few engineers nodded slowly, embarrassed, but wiser. An alarm chimed softly, not a warning this time, but a status confirmation. The ship was secure. Outside, the ocean rolled on, unaware of how close the ship had come to blindness. The captain turned to his crew. Log the incident. Full report. Then, quietly, to Hayes, would you consider staying for the debrief? Hayes looked at the radar screen one last time, steady, faithful. I never really left, he said. And for the first time that day, everyone believed him. The radar room no longer felt the same. The tension that had once pressed against the walls was gone, replaced by a quiet order. Consoles hummed steadily. Screens glowed with confidence. The ship had its eyes back. But something else had changed, too. The way people stood. The way they spoke. The way they looked at the old man. Chief Petty Officer Hayes sat at a small table near the back of the room during the debrief, hands folded, listening more than speaking. The younger officers presented data, timelines, and corrective actions. But every few minutes, someone glanced in his direction, silently checking for approval. Not because he demanded it, because he had earned it. One engineer cleared his throat. Sir, Chief Hayes identified a legacy synchronization flaw that wasn't covered in our manuals. The captain nodded. Why wasn't it? The room hesitated. Hayes spoke gently. Because manuals get rewritten, experience doesn't. No one argued. After the debrief, the captain dismissed the room, but stopped Hayes with a raised hand. Chief, he said, lowering his voice, may I walk with you? They stepped out onto the deck. The sea stretched endlessly around them, calm now, reflecting the late sunlight. The wind carried salt and memory. I owe you an apology, the captain said after a moment. So does this ship. Hayes looked at the horizon. No apology needed, sir. There is, the captain insisted. You were doubted. Hayes smiled faintly. Doubt comes with age. So does patience. They walked in silence for a few steps. The captain said, "Most of my crew thought you were just visiting." Hayes chuckled softly. "I was visiting an old friend." The captain stopped. "You built this system." "Not this version," Hayes corrected. "The bones of it. Before the screens were flat. Before software did the thinking." And yet the captain said, "You understood it better than anyone in that room." Hayes turned. "Because I didn't see a machine. I saw behavior." The captain nodded slowly, absorbing that. A young technician approached hesitantly, helmet tucked under his arm. "Chief, sir." Hayes turned. "Yes. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry. For earlier." Hayes studied him, not sternly, not critically. "Did you learn something?" he asked. "Yes, sir." "Then we're even." The technician smiled, relieved, humbled, and walked away straighter than before. As Hayes prepared to leave, the captain extended his hand. "If you ever want to consult, formally, this ship would be honored." Hayes shook his hand firmly. "Keep listening," he said. "You'll be fine." He walked toward the exit slowly, his figure smaller against the vast steel of the ship. Behind him, the radar continued its steady sweep. Watching, protecting, remembering. The ship sailed on through the open sea, radar sweeping in perfect rhythm. Green lines circled the screen, steady, reliable, alive. For the crew, the crisis was over. Logs were written, reports filed, protocols updated. To most of the world, it would become just another routine incident buried in classified archives. But not for the people who were there. In the radar room, a junior technician paused before starting his shift. He reached down and lightly tapped the lower access panel, the one no one used to look at. He didn't fully understand why. He just remembered. Lieutenant Carter caught himself listening differently now, not just watching data, but noticing patterns. Small delays, subtle changes, things he would have dismissed before. Across the ship, something invisible had shifted. Respect had been recalibrated. In the captain's office, a single name was added to the after-action report under external assistance. Chief Petty Officer Samuel Hayes read. The captain stared at it for a long moment before signing. "Experience saved lives today," he thought. Weeks later, a training memo circulated quietly through the fleet. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't long. One line stood out. "When systems fail silently, consult those who remember how they learned to speak." No one questioned where it came from. Somewhere ashore, Hayes sat on a weathered bench overlooking the water, a thermos in his hand. Ships passed on the horizon, steel shapes cutting through sunlight. He didn't miss the uniform. He missed the purpose. A young sailor approached hesitantly. "Excuse me, are you Chief Hayes?" Hayes looked up, surprised. "I was." The sailor smiled. "They tell your story in training now." Hayes chuckled softly. "Do they get right? They say legends don't retire." Hayes shook his head. "Legends rest. Experience waits." The sailor nodded, as if committing it to memory. As the sun dipped lower, Hayes stood slowly, joints stiff but spirit steady. He took one last look at the sea, at the ships that still depended on systems he once helped shape. He turned away, satisfied, because he knew something the world often forgets. The newest tools may be faster. The smartest systems may be sharper. But when everything goes silent,